Hi there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 230. 230 of these babies in the book now for the Duke Basketball Report podcast. For this episode, though, we're going by the name The Duke Football Report. We're going to be all football all the time because there is actual Duke sports to talk about. The football team played a game just a few hours ago, and we're going to give you all the lowdown on that, other stuff that happened in the ACC regarding football news. You're going to get it all in this podcast, but you're not going to get it all just from me. I am Jason Evans. I'm your host this week. I am joined, as I always am, by my buddies, Donald Wine and Sam Klein. I will start with Sam. Sam, how you doing? Where you at these days?
I am good. I am in my apartment in Boston where I am still unloading furniture. So let's see. I put together a desk chair today, and I unpacked a lot of pieces of a couch, which was difficult. But so now I'm sitting on my new couch. I don't have a coffee table of any kind, so I have the upturned box of the desk chair as my coffee table here in the living room because I've got the Laker game on. It's Saturday night for folks who are counting at home. It's Saturday night, so I've got the Laker game on the TV, and I'm here, and it's a little bit of a makeshift situation, but I'm doing good.
Sounds great. Donald Wine. Donald, DC Donald. How's it going there down in the nation's capital?
It's going great for me. Sam was doing some work because, when you move into a new place, you have to do stuff like put together furniture. For me, it has been a sports weekend, and I'm just going to list the leagues that I have watched so far in the last 24 hours. EPL, NFL, NCAA football, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, US Open, Aussie Rules Football League, MLS, NWSL, La Liga, and League 1. And that is not counting any. I don't think there was any fights on this weekend, but if there were, I probably would have watched that too. Oh, and I did a Zoom wedding. I was in a Zoom wedding where my buddy from Duke got married. So that was also part of this day. So literally, I've done everything this weekend.
A very successful weekend, and it's only Saturday night. But let's put that aside and let's talk about some Duke football. Because the Blue Devils went out. They played the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This is, by the way, a Fighting Irish team ranked in the top 10 in the nation, considered a national title contender. Duke went to Notre Dame to play this game. The Blue Devils are on the losing end of this one, 27-13. I don't think that final score was indicative of how close the game was. It was a very, very competitive game until Notre Dame kind of broke it open a little bit at the very, very end. But this is a game where, look, it was 17-13 into the fourth quarter. Duke was right there. And for a team that had a brand new quarterback, I thought it was a tremendously encouraging start. I got a lot of stats and other things to talk about, but I'm going to go to Donald first. Donald, tell me what you saw from this game. And by the way, before we get to that, I do want to remind everyone on the preview, I got to take my bow. I got to take my props. On the preview, we were talking about Notre Dame, and I said, hey, watch out for this guy, Kyron Williams. I said, I don't know much about Notre Dame, but this Kyron Williams guy, everyone's talking about him. He might be pretty good. Dude went for more than 200 yards from scrimmage. He was the reason they won the game.
Yeah, and honestly, to go back to what we said on the last episode about what we needed to do to win, we needed to eliminate the big play, we needed to establish the run, and we needed to play with poise. Now, I thought we played with poise, and I will say I'm never pleased when we lose, but I will say that I was pretty pleased with the way we played. I thought we played a pretty good football game against a really good football team. The one place I think we struggled was on the run, both on offense and defense. On offense, we only rushed for 70 yards total as a team, with Deion Jackson kind of leading the way there. But also on defense, like you said, Kyron Williams just went off on us, and he was all over the place. We couldn't really stop it. The other thing that I will say that we didn't do well is, we wanted to limit the big play, and they had a few big plays that kind of were backbreakers in the sense that it gave them momentum, it gave them a first down, or it gave them a touchdown that really led up to the final score. But I will say that, going into Notre Dame is not an easy place to play. I don't care how many fans are in the stands, whether it be the full 80,000 or the whatever 13,000 or so that were there today. But I do think that those guys did play with poise. They played within themselves, and they were with the number 10 team in the land for basically 48 minutes of this game until it kind of, as you said, kind of got away from them at the end. The one thing I will say about our offense, I thought Chase Bryce did a pretty good job at moving the offense down the field in the first half. In the second half, it was a little shakier. We couldn't hold on to the football at times, and that was allowing Notre Dame to get a little bit of momentum. And momentum is one thing that you want to always try and have when you're trying to pull off the upset. But I think overall, the play calling I thought was pretty good on offense and defense. And I think the guys really, I think there's some good positives that we can take away from this game to go up against Boston College next weekend. But I do think that we were hanging with them. We had a chance, I thought, to win it in the fourth quarter, and it just kind of got away from us. That's going to happen in football games, but I think this is something that they shouldn't hang their heads over. This is something that we can take and work on the things that we need to improve on for next weekend.
Yeah, and look, the reality is when you are playing a team as good as Notre Dame, when you're trying to upset a top 10 team on the road, you need to make the big plays. You need to make those, those moments in the game. There aren't a lot of them, but there are those moments where you go, ooh, this is one of those big plays. And let's recount some of them. I mean, to me, a lot of it was on short yardage. Duke struggled. We failed to convert a 4th and 2 at the Notre Dame 39 on our opening drive. We had 1st and goal from the Notre Dame 8. We only got a field goal out of it. We had 2nd and goal from the Notre Dame 2, from the 2-yard line. We only got a field goal out of it. When you're going to upset a top 10 team, you got to make those little plays. And we had Notre Dame at one point 4th and 8 from their own 21, and they attempted a fake punt. I mean, that is a gutsy, that is a ballsy call. 4th and 8 from your own 21. They were down 3-0 at the time, I believe. It was early in the game, and it was clear that Notre Dame felt this Duke team's here to play. We need to pull out something unusual to defeat these guys, because we killed them in the first quarter. We beat them 151-20 in terms of yardage in the first quarter. I mean, Duke dominated, and one of the stories of the game was we dominated, but we didn't put points on the board. And to beat a top team, that's the kind of thing you got to do. Sam, what were your takeaways from this? What are the things that you really like that you saw from Duke?
I agree with Donald that most of what I saw was encouraging, and to go back to some of those plays, Jason. I mean, those little plays like the Notre Dame fake punt and Duke's inability to score when they were deep in the red zone. I mean, those plays right there are the difference in the game. The Notre Dame fake punt eventually led to a touchdown by Notre Dame. Duke misses out on 8 points in going the other way in the red zone, and that's the entire final margin. Not to mention, I think that Duke played, I thought, pretty well through 3 quarters, and then it just seemed like they got tired, which is discouraging given that it's early in the season and you would think that conditioning is there. But look, Notre Dame is showing up with a different class of athletes, especially among their starters, than most of the rest of the ACC, save perhaps for Clemson. And UNC is supposed to be good this year. There are a few other teams that are pretty competitive, but for the most part, Notre Dame is showing up with better athletes than everyone else is. We talked about how you could think about this game being similar to Duke having to play Alabama in the early game, in the first game of the season last year. But Duke was able to hang. I liked the way Chase Bryce played. I was really impressed with him. He was managing the game well early. One thing that I don't think we talked about much in the lead up to his debut is that for basically 5 years prior to this, Coach Cutcliffe has featured a running quarterback between Quentin Harris and Daniel Jones. And Chase Bryce had a rushing touchdown today, but Chase Bryce is not a running quarterback. He is much more of a traditional pocket quarterback and wants to make plays with his arm, not really with his legs. So this is an adjustment for the entire Duke team, because we had that safety valve for many years of having the quarterback able to run. That's not the case this year. You're going to see a more traditional David Cutcliffe offense, and we saw how much they were able to click early in the game, even though, as we said, they didn't lead to touchdowns. But I thought Chase Bryce looked pretty comfortable, and he's going to only continue getting more comfortable. He didn't have like a favorite target today. I don't know how I feel about that being like going one way or another on that.
I don't know about that. I thought he and Noah Gray, senior tight end Noah Gray, I think he was looking for Noah Gray more than anybody else, for good reason. Noah Gray's a heck of a player.
But I like the fact that there were lots of guys involved. I think that's important for this Duke team, and if especially if fatigue is an issue, which we definitely saw on defense late in the game. Depth is important in that regard. So one of the things I'm looking forward to is Duke plays Boston College this weekend, back home at Wallace Wade Stadium in front of no fans. Unfortunately, is BC hasn't played a game yet. They didn't play this weekend, so they are playing their first game of the season next weekend. And BC's not bringing the same athletes to the game that Notre Dame is, but Duke has to not get tired. If Duke wants to score a win against Boston College, they need to be playing hard all the way through the end of the fourth quarter. Because let's face it, if this Duke Notre Dame game had only been 45 minutes and the teams were kind of game playing around that, Duke could have easily won this game and had a huge upset. So I think that last quarter of football really doomed the Blue Devils, and a couple different bounces. And this we could have been talking about a huge Duke victory today.
Yeah, and I want to get to the defense just for a moment. I was tremendously impressed with our defensive line. Notre Dame returned all 5 starters on their offensive line, and when I was looking forward to this game, I was terrified that they were going to run all over us, that Ian Book was going to be able to sit in the pocket and not have to worry about any defensive pressure or anything like that. And that was absolutely not the case. And I think the Duke defensive line may have been, I don't know if they were the best unit that we had of all the different units today, but they were darn close to it. They got 3 sacks, which is a pretty decent number, again, against a really good Notre Dame team and a really good quarterback in Ian Book. The rushing, Notre Dame was able to rush pretty successfully against us, but that came in pockets. There were lots of times they were rushing the ball and they were not getting very far. So I thought on the line we played very, very effectively. Donald, let's wrap up. Chase Bryce is the guy everyone was here to see. So tell me a little bit more about what you got on Chase Bryce, and then we'll turn to other football matters.
Yeah, but real quick, you were mentioning the defense. I just want to give a quick shout out to Mark Gilbert, who has missed a lot of the last 2 to 3 years with a lot of hip injuries. Came back and led the team in tackles today, was all over the place on defense. So I wanted to give him a quick shout out because I thought he played really well in his first game back in a long time. It was great to see number 28 back on the field. But back to Chase Bryce, I think the one thing that I'm going to look to see what they can improve on next week, at least for him. I thought like Sam said, I thought he did a great job at commanding the offense, moving the ball down the field, trying to make plays with his arm. They mentioned before during the game that they didn't have any scrimmages where they were able to play other teams. Sometimes they get an opportunity to do so in the preseason. That obviously didn't happen this year, and this was their first game. So there's a lot of things that are very close to being together, but you can see that they're just not fully sharp yet. And a lot of it that I saw was downfield. He's this close, this close to getting some of those balls downfield that would have been some big plays, and they're just missing. I think the timing that that he has with these receivers, he's spreading the ball to a lot of guys, and I think the timing is going to get better as we move on during the season. And I can see that as he was coming off the field after some of those, he would go right to that receiver and go, okay, that's on me. I should have gotten to you here. And you could tell that they're, very, very close to getting it all put together. So we'll see against Boston College if it's something that they can improve on, because if a couple of those plays that are going 20 yards land in the hands of the receivers, I think this ball game's a lot different.
Yeah, coulda, woulda, shoulda. We came very close, and we're going to be back on the field, though, God willing, assuming things go well with this crazy pandemic. Duke will be back on the field next week against Boston College. We're going to have a preview of that and also talk about some other football news that came out about what could force the ACC to stop playing football. We'll have all that for you right after this quick break. So let's look at who's next up for the Blue Devils. We'll be facing the Boston College Eagles. We don't have a lot to say about BC because they didn't play yet. No game for them this week. They are going to start their schedule against Duke. Gives us probably a little bit of an advantage because we've already played a game. We know what it's like to get out there and battle against someone else, and Boston College is doing it for the first time here next week. So let's preview that game, and let's start. Sam, give me, tell me a little bit about what you are expecting to see, hoping to see from Duke. What should we expect to see from Boston College?
I mentioned the big thing I'm looking for is Duke not getting fatigued in this game. So whether that's running more guys out onto the field, whether that's playing better and just preventing the big play, which they did a good job, not a great job of against Notre Dame. I think fatigue, especially for the defense, is going to be a major factor for Duke. And then the continued development of Chase Bryce, seeing the way that he moves the ball around. As Donald said, him being able to execute a big play will really help this Duke team. Duke had to manufacture a lot of yards. They had to spend a lot of time. The offense had to spend a lot of time on the field to not end up with that many touchdowns on the day here. So I want to see Chase Bryce make some big plays. I want to see the defense stay in front of Boston College's players. Again, I'm not going to tell you that I know a ton about BC's football offense, but I'm hoping that they are not exactly the guys that Notre Dame is bringing. And then also seeing Wallace Wade Stadium, unlike it's normally half empty look, it's going to be fully empty. So today at Notre Dame, obviously the crowd was sparse because of pandemic related limitations. I think they said they only had basically students, family of the players, and Notre Dame faculty and staff were the only ones in attendance. There, you couldn't just buy a ticket to this game. You had to be affiliated with the program in one way or another. So they only had those people, but the crowd was there. It was loud. It was engaged. The students looked like they were having a good time. So what will it be like for Duke to play in an empty stadium next week against an opponent that is not as good as Notre Dame, but is still coming? Jason, you were saying that they haven't played yet, so maybe they're not sharp, but they will be more rested than Duke is. So we're looking forward to that. And then I know we'll get, I think, a little bit more towards future schedule news because it relates to Virginia Tech and the rest of the ACC. But I think it's going to be interesting how Duke manages this game. And I was talking about the fatigue, how they manage this game relative to the rest of the schedule coming down the pipe with changes to the schedule coming out today from the ACC.
Yeah, so I got a little bit I can tell you about BC, and perhaps the most significant thing to happen with them, they got a transfer from Notre Dame, quarterback Phil Jerkovic. And here's the thing about Phil. He was a huge high school recruit. This guy was supposedly he was like the best quarterback recruit to come to Notre Dame in like decades, but he never cracked the lineup there. Ian Book, has been Notre Dame's starter for several years now, and Jerkovic could never, get very much playing time at all at Notre Dame. I think he only threw for 18 passes in his career at Notre Dame. But he transferred. He's been granted immediate eligibility, and so he's going to be BC's starting quarterback. And I think we're looking at a game that could be a game, where there are a lot of points scored because BC is a very good offensive team. They have a really good offensive line, one of the better offensive lines in the ACC, but they are terrible. Let me tell you, they are really bad on defense. Last year, they allowed more than 32 points per game to their opponents, 101st out of 130 teams in the country. So they were like the bottom, 15, 20% in terms of defensive scoring allowed last year. And their secondary is god-awful. And they've got most of the guys back from that god-awful secondary. So they're still going to be god-awful probably. So look for Chase Bryce is going to have a big week, I think, for Duke to win this game. BC, by the way, Duke was picked 12th in the, remember, it's all 15 teams. Everybody's in one big division. Duke was picked 12th in the preseason. BC was picked 13th. So this is one of those games we got to win against an opponent that we should be able to put points on the board against. Donald, what you got? Talk a little bit about the running game for me, because that's an important part of what we need to accomplish.
Absolutely. And like you said, if you want to get Chase Bryce involved, you want to have a running game that is going to establish themselves and a line that's going to establish themselves so that Chase Bryce has room to throw. And I mean, today there was times where Chase Bryce had a little bit of pressure because the running game had not been established. Again, we had a cumulative total of 70 yards rushing today. That's got to change. If we can get into the 125, 130, even 150 range, that's just going to open up more opportunities for Chase Bryce to throw the football, or even just have that threat of, I can hand it off to Deion Jackson or toss it to somebody in the flat and have them go. this is something that they can get done against Boston College. And so I hope that they will look to establish that early on in this game, because if they can establish the run and get at least some ground yardage where the defensive line for Boston College gets tired, that's only going to allow that very terrible, awful secondary that you mentioned to have more pressure on them, because we're going to be throwing the ball downfield.
Yeah, and let's move to you guys have alluded to it a little bit, but let's move to the notion of how many games are we going to get in? How many games are going to be played? Because there was a really interesting document that was released by Virginia Tech today. We should note that Virginia Tech was supposed to play Virginia. And just hours before that game was going to start, Virginia Tech was forced to cancel the game, presumably because of too much coronavirus, too much COVID on the Virginia Tech team. And this document released by Virginia Tech is a document that the entire ACC has signed off on, and it says that there must be at least 8 ACC teams playing football. 8 out of the 15 need to be playing football for the season to continue. If you drop below 8 teams playing football, then they're allowed the ACC is allowed to say, okay, we're done. We cannot continue to play. There's just clearly not enough teams for us to continue to play. It's not safe for us to continue to play. The other thing that came out in this document was that if either the SEC or the Big 12 stops playing football, the ACC, again, has the option at that point to stop playing football. But so essentially this document lays out the conditions under which the ACC could go, okay, we're done. We're not going to do this anymore. Sam, I want to go to you first. What does all this say to you? What does it mean that Virginia Tech, we're canceling game? We haven't even played a game and we're already canceling games. Is it going to work? Do you think we're going to make it through more than maybe 1 or 2 more games?
I feel like they'll still get through a handful of games. I doubt that the season is going to finish the way that the ACC has it planned because of this Virginia Tech news. The ACC today had to rejigger the schedule, so Virginia Tech's next couple of games are canceled, or at least they're postponed until later in the year, including a game against Virginia. So what does that mean for Duke? Most directly is that the Duke-Virginia game that was supposed to be in mid-November was moved up to late September. Duke's original schedule was going to have Notre Dame and then Boston College and then their first bye game. The way that the ACC had initially planned the season is that the teams were going to get a couple of bye games throughout the shortened season to accommodate for potential schedule changes, and they're already having to activate it here, and it's affecting Duke. So Duke was going to get 2 games to start the season and then a break and then a few more games. Now Duke is getting 6 games at the beginning of the season, which puts the players in a totally different mindset, because if you talk to any football coach, they are dividing up the season according to when the bye games are. So you guys know that, like, when we talk about in basketball, the way that the team plays a basketball game, like Coach K divides the basketball game into those chunks of 4 minutes between the media timeouts. Think of the football season the same way, that the coaches are looking at the football season in the areas, between the bye games. And in college, even during a normal season, the teams usually get 2 bye games. Sometimes they only get 1, but often they get 2. And with the ACC making this big change today, all of a sudden Duke was going into the Notre Dame game thinking, we just need to have the energy to play 2 weeks in a row and then we get a week off. Now we're playing 6 weeks in a row, and it totally changes the mindset. I actually saw a quote from Coach Cutcliffe after the game that said that they found out this news right before they took the field, and the players were feeling a little distracted and a little concerned about it because they hadn't prepped this week for 6 weeks in a row of football. So it's affecting Duke, but what can the players do? I mean, in this totally crazy time and during this crazy season, these are the changes that the conference and the schools are going to have to make to have the thing keep going. So I feel like it signals to me that we're not going to get a completion to this football season if we're already scrambling to move the schedule around. But maybe this is it. Maybe this is the wake up call that the schools and the programs need, and they tighten up the testing. They make it much more frequent. They keep all the student athletes isolated, and hopefully we can get to the end of the season. I think that note about the SEC and the Big 12 is interesting because now the ACC is really relying on lots of other schools to maintain their end of the bargain. And it's not like the ACC and the SEC are playing each other. at least not. I don't. There might be non-conference games, but I don't believe any of them are playing this year. So it's dependent on a lot of other conferences holding down the testing and their student athletes. So that part's interesting to me. But yeah, I guess we'll see. It does stink for Duke that the schedule had to get rearranged this way.
And at the same time, you mentioned they're moving the Virginia game up to the bye week that we would have had on September 26th, give or take a day. But then you also have Virginia Tech's first game that they're going to play is that following week against us in Durham. So not only that, we are going to be playing a team that was affected by this postponement, and then also we're going to play the team that caused the postponement and caused this rearrange of the schedule. So I think when it comes to all of this, I'm going to break it down simply. It's a mess. It's a complete, utter mess because, like you said, you're moving games from November to September. You're moving bye weeks around. You have games who are, teams who are just going to be, they scheduled 2 bye weeks for a reason. They knew that teams were affected by the preseason because of the fact that they couldn't really practice with each other in the ways that they normally would during a preseason. And now they're telling the same teams, hey, you got to play 6 straight weeks. And that's something that you can't really do during a normal season, but during this COVID season, that is really, really bad. So when I think there's that, and then there's also the fact that you're talking about the Big 12 and the SEC. If they were to postpone, they could throw things into disarray. The Big 10 is going to be voting on Sunday whether to resume their season in October. It's just a big mess. I don't think anyone is talking to each other. We've said this many, many times, and I think at least the ACC has a plan, but the plan being out, the plan having factors that are coming from outside the conference and coming from all these other areas and all these other what ifs, I think makes it a situation that's so fluid that it really affects how these guys prepare.
Well, I want to be clear, and I think everyone should understand these conditions, eight teams being able to play, the SEC and the Big 12 continuing to play. These are not ways that the ACC would automatically shut down. These are just conditions where they could consider it. I think they had to sort of put in place something where they said, look, everybody, we will keep on playing unless certain things happen. And then if those things happen, we'll think about whether we need to shut it down. Frankly, if the ACC is getting games played and there are not coronavirus outbreaks happening on teams, and it's worth noting that Duke has done an incredible job of this. Notre Dame has done a very, very good job of this. I am very confident, based on the testing numbers we've seen, that the game today between Duke and Notre Dame was a pretty safe circumstance, and that there's no reason for that game not to happen. I'm not going to talk about the fans in the stands. That's a whole different matter. I have no judgment on any of that. I can't make a judgment on that. There's not enough testing to know. But these 2 teams that took the field today, that was a safe situation. My point in all this is I think there are ways to do it that are safe, and they just want to sort of know, here's how we might shut down if we have to. And that's the fair thing. That's the wise thing to do. If we get to only 8 teams playing, we're shutting down because there's not enough teams to play each other at that point. And at that point, it's clear that there's such an outbreak that you can't control it. Am I right, Donald?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, if it's written on paper that 8 teams is the threshold that they start talking about it, I'm thinking at that point is more than talk, right? Like you'll have half the teams not playing. You have the other half worrying about the teams that they are playing. The national championship will be in disarray because conferences are deciding to get back in the game or get back out of the game. And really, we said this before. It's too many people that have to be perfect for this to go the way it is as scheduled. And already we're not even done with week 1 in the Power 5. And we have one team that's so not perfect that 2 teams are being affected by it. Well, actually 3 teams, because Duke is one of those teams. And then the 2 teams that they were supposed to play that are not going to get played. So really at this point, let's just go 1-0 every day. Let's just borrow the Washington Nationals mantra from last year. Just go 1-0 every day. If we can get through tomorrow and nothing happens, it'll be a good day. And then we'll focus on Monday.
If 6 ACC teams are changing their schedules and shutting down because of outbreaks, Yeah, I think the season is toast. I don't think they have to get to 8 teams for this to happen, because 6 means basically every game that week is getting rescheduled. So
At 6 teams, honestly, at 6 teams, there'll be other teams that aren't a part of that 6. They're just gonna be like, no, we're done. Like, I'm not gonna wait for you. We'll just pull ourselves.
Exactly. We don't know where this thing is headed next if it's that bad. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Donald, I think your advice is perfect. Let's try and get through tomorrow, and then the day after that, and the day after that. We'll worry about that when we get there. But for now, that's a great way for us to wrap it up here on the Duke Basketball Report podcast, the Duke Football Report podcast, I should say. This was episode 230. Donald and Sam, thanks for joining me. I am Jason. There will be more Duke football coming at you, and there's going to be a lot more basketball coming at you coming up very, very soon. But until then, Duke Band, take us home.